Mount Palgong in Flames, entry by Chotu Su. As a squad head of the 2nd Battalion, 83rd Regiment, 8th Infantry Division, I fought on Mount Palgong, a gateway to Jinhai and Busan at the southern tip of the country. Whenever I recollect the hand-to-hand fighting and bloody battles on high and low hills in this region, the last requests of my comrades in arms come into my mind. For its strategic location, the mountain was turned into a fierce battlefield. My battalion advanced more than 8 kilometers overnight and seized the lowest height of the mountain, to the left of which lay the railway line leading to Yongchon. An intense bombing raid hindered our offensive. At early dawn, enemy fighters appeared overhead, firing machine guns and dropping bombs. Then came a heavy artillery bombardment. Trees were severely peppered with shrapnel, and incendiary bombs exploded here and there. I was lying beside a small, bristle-toothed oak, which was broken off in an instant. Leaves trembled in the young pine trees around me. My squad was firing back at the enemy soldiers climbing the hill. I was choked by smoke amid the roaring artillery barrage. As we were running short of bullets, we fired one shot after another. Suddenly, I heard a cry of pain from one of my men just a stone's throw away. I rolled over to where the 16-year-old soldier was lying unconscious. I struggled to take shrapnel out of his skull and bandaged his neck to stop bleeding from the carotid artery. I had no time to attend to the injured. The light machine gun beside my trench came to an abrupt halt. Shrapnel was run through the abdomen of my deputy, who was handling the weapon, the pivot of the firepower of our platoon, and my squad. When I crept up to the machine gun platform, the dying man urged me on. I couldn't afford time to close the eyes of my deputy. I replaced the magazine with a new one and opened fire. A soldier shouted that the platoon leader lost his eyes, the man who had been appointed only a few days ago. To make matters worse, there was no more rattling of the submachine gun at the summit of the hill. I ran up and found the assistant platoon leader lying face down and bleeding profusely. No bullets remained in the magazine. Following the death of our company commander, I took on his role. The enemy was tenacious in spite of heavy casualties. However, we defied death to carry out Supreme Commander Kim Il-sung's order. Silence reigned for a while after fierce fighting. I ran to see the platoon leader. Before the outbreak of the war, he was in his final year at the then Chongjin College of Education. If the war had not broken out, he might have been my literature teacher. Having his eyes bandaged, he refused to be carried back to hospital. He grasped his men's hands one by one and called me, gasping as he was in acute pain. He asked me to recite a poem. If only my poem could have restored the sight of the handsome man. My teary poem sounded as resolute as my determination to sacrifice myself unhesitatingly for the good of the country. The blind man smiled as happily as he did when reading the poems I had written impromptu on my pocketbook, and when urging me to send the poems to my parents and teachers, he thanked me and other soldiers for giving him a great encouragement, and called upon us to fight bravely for our native land. Among the 64 soldiers of the company, there were only 22 remaining 1 hour after the start of the first battle. Now these survivors prepared for another battle, rummaging through the corpses of enemy soldiers for ammunitions and digging trenches deeper despite a series of low-level bombing raids. The enemy launched one offensive after another under cover of massive bombardment. When we managed to repulse the last attack, I felt a sharp pain in my shoulders, the barrel of my rifle being as hot as molten iron. I counted how many hand grenades were remaining and sat back in the trench. The sky looked serene, as if it had not been caring about the flames of war. Enemy gunfire grew heavier with each passing day. No one of my soldiers was sure whether he would survive or not, and every one of them was resolved to wage a do-or-die fight so as to honor the fallen soldier's exploits. Some days later, informed of the enemy's landing operations in Incheon, we joined the ranks of the units on a strategic, temporary retreat. We were facing a large-scale encirclement by the enemy, and it was so heartrending to leave the mountain that was captured at the cost of our soldiers' blood and sweat. It seemed as if the soldiers buried in the valleys of the Gyeongsang Mountains were dissuading me from going over the Sobak Mountains. I recited poems to myself, longing for my comrades in arms who were formerly students brimming with hopes and ambitions and now laid to rest in the southern tip of the country. Departing from the unforgettable battlefield, I pledged to return and avenge their deaths without fail.